Legend, we've gone full circle here.
How so?
You know, 8 years ago, we had the Total War podcast. At the time, you know, the first Warhammer, we both hated it. So we're like, that was literally every podcast.
I'm going to just correct you there. I didn't hate it. I just thought it was really mid.
It was the heart of the podcast. I hate Warhammer, you know.
Or maybe I did hate it and I just forgot I hated it.
That's good.
Keep telling yourself that we are enjoying their games and your little baby rebellion have nowhere to get you. GTFO already.
What an odd thing to say, and an even odder way to say it. If I'm a rebel, what does that make you? Some kind of loyal servant? It's so weird.
The categories of Total War players are the new players, as you said, the loyalists, as you said, the low-standard people, as you said, the Warhammer fans, as you said, the old player base who is unhappy, and then the old total purists like you who think Total War has been in decline since after Medieval 2.
As much as I like the term Puritan, when did it become taboo to criticize corporations? I think personally that it happened somewhere around 2010. That's when it became toxic to criticize multi-billion-dollar corporations and the people who suck their dick.
Hating on your fellow consumers who you can persuade to also force change on CA, the worst company, next to maybe only EA and Paradox, isn't gonna save Total War.
Truly, I don't hate. I'm not hating on anyone. I don't hate many things. And the things that I do hate, I hate with perfect hatred. Which means I have very little hate to throw out frivolously. I don't hate, I criticize. I'm a critic. Everything I say is strictly on a professional level, especially when it comes to my peers. I don't think these people shouldn't be allowed to make money or not have everything they need. I don't think that certain people shouldn't exist, if you know what I mean. It's never personal. It's all strictly professional. That being said, Andy of Andy's Take, you are a rat bastard scumbag. At no point in time do you adequately or accurately represent this conversation, the people involved, or the topics brought up during its entire duration. And at some points, you just straight up lie about what's being said.
Trying to demonize an entire audience.
You know, it's just, it's amazing. It's just so frustrating. And I just see these people as like filth. They're worms.
If you roll that clip back about a minute, you will see that Apollo is not talking about any fan base. He's talking about you.
This has been hours now of Legend being rational, of Legend being a person that, let's face it, back in like 2018 and when like Thrones of Britannia came out, I could have never seen him be. But it's rare that you see someone as calm and collected as he's been in this conversation. I know
Legend is calm and collected in these videos because he's talking to people he views as comrades. They agree on practically every topic, and in his own words, by the end of it, they were practically shaking hands. They weren't attacking him, they weren't cornering him, and he was the one who took the initiative to set it up. This fantasy versus historical argument you harp on has never been the point of contention. These games could have a Lord of the Rings brand paint on them, and they would still be revered as badly as they are now. The only reason Warhammer is used as the example for when these games started going downhill is because it was the first to use the framework that makes these games not so good.
You're an adult. This is a video game.
To some people, it's a livelihood. To others, it's a hobby they're passionate about. And if you're like me, you understand that the issues represented here extend far beyond this game and the gaming industry as a whole. Yeah, seriously, I don't know if you're incompetent or disingenuous or maybe a mixture of the two, but you should actually be ashamed of this. Don't delete it, though, because I need an example. Oh, one more thing. If you're going to be condescending and arrogant when you talk down to people, I suggest you get a firm grasp on the English language before you do, just kind of as an entry-level thing.
People who enjoy Total War Pharaoh Dynasties, I see it very often, get bashed by other Total War players for their opinion, and the game gets bashed as well, for simply not being the setting that they want.
Terminator, I have watched your video, and I have no idea what you're talking about. I have never seen this argument brought up in this capacity. I'm sure that there were some people who were mad about Pharaoh because it wasn't the game they wanted, but I think that is just mostly the fact that the Total War community is fed up with Creative Assembly as a whole. I feel like you forget that there's 10 years worth of bad blood built up between the Total War community and Creative Assembly. I mainly want to address, though, you call out a small group of, what do you call it? A small toxic minority. Who are these people? Give us names. Who are you talking about? Say it with your chest. If you have a problem with somebody, just say it. You know, that's what all of this is about. Communication, right? So let's start communicating. No one wants to hear these lukewarm, on the fence takes. We're past that. I have staved off your verbal public execution because I genuinely believe that you are capable of being insightful and having an intelligent conversation. So grow some balls, yeah. Okay, we can do it. I'll help you. We can do it together. All right, we'll do that. I initially intended for this to be a more in-depth breakdown of this conversation, but there's so much that you should just go watch it. And I feel like anybody who cares already has. So instead, this will be a summary analysis where I occasionally give my 2 cents, just to save everybody some time, because my attention span is at its wit's end. I clocked out like 2 weeks ago. Okay.
The fall of Total War. Where do you think it started exactly? Like, where was the actual beginning of the end for Total War?
Here they each give their opinion of when perhaps Total War started its decline. I personally think that its decline could be pinned at many points in time, and they would all be correct to a degree. There's also talk of mishandled management, production, staff, finances, and it's basically cultivated this mediocre era we're in with Total War, and if the company went under right now, there would be no love lost.
When it comes to naval battles, I do think that they'll bring them back when it's appropriate, well, more appropriate for the time setting.
Appropriate for the time period? Now we're concerned about historical accuracy. These games don't have naval battles in them because they don't feel like putting them in. They don't care. They don't want to put in the work. They'll do it for Warhammer, though, because there's enough content there for 3 more games, and you morons will buy anything. At 11 minutes and 10 seconds in the first part, someone starts eating.
Ironed out. I think I'm deluding myself thinking that will be the case. But that is what I want.
I thought we were being professionals here, guys. Legend mentions that he would like to see a Medieval 2 remaster. Apollo answers that by saying that it wouldn't be enough, and he's right. We're long past the point where we're pining for new features and remakes. The company has to change drastically now before any of that other stuff matters.
They had a flanking morale penalty, they had attacked in rear, and these were significant penalties, contrary to what you just said. If you defeat...
all these penalties still in Warhammer, they're just insignificant now.
The subject of morale and certain winning conditions are brought up here in this segment. 3K is brought up as an example of where AI just isn't where it needs to be performance-wise, and how that has aided in the downfall of the gameplay experience in the Total War games.
Do you think that CA over-focusing on improving and streamlining the campaign mechanics rather than battles is preventing Total War from being what it always was about, an RTT game with a sandbox campaign for said battles?
It's hard to say, because I kind of feel like with Creative Assembly, what's happening is that there are many cooks in the kitchen.
I initially had a snippy comment here for this, but he's right. The company is too big. It's too massive, it's too bloated like a corpse, and I genuinely believe a step to mending these games and to mending this company, it would be cutting the fat completely. Legend brings up that there's no reward for finishing campaigns, and I think that's true. They tried to do that with Warhammer, with the Chaos Incursion, but all they did was generate a few armies on the map and called it a day, which might have been fun if the battles weren't so joyless and the AI wasn't so easily outsmarted. Apollo brings up that Shogun 2 did it pretty well, and I think they did too. It gave you a little in-game goal to achieve, and depending on what you did or what side you picked, it changed the in-game slightly, giving it a different experience every time, adding to replayability. It was pretty good. The things we took for granted. The Shogun 2 discussion continues, citing that even similar units had different attributes, which added to utility and variety to units that would otherwise be monotonous. The topic then moves on to CA's ability to bring spectacle to a historical setting.
Warhammer in many ways is a double-edged sword for Creative Assembly, because they're focused so much on making things look really cool, and so now they've got this really high fantasy setting, and then when they decide to go to the Bronze Age, they can't do anything with that because they haven't built mechanics for robust gameplay. They've built it for spectacle.
Then build the mechanics. Isn't that what we pay the developers to do to make the game?
And the spectacle of the Bronze Age can't compete with flying dragons, shooting.
I don't believe that Pharaoh can't compete because it doesn't have dragons in it. That's Warhammer's focal point, the high fantasy. If you can't translate that to the Bronze Age, then focus on something that makes that era spectacular. These larger-than-life civilizations that sprung up after the discovery and utilization of bronze. Make that the focus. Make city building more in-depth. Focus more on the cultures, and maybe add some more features to religion, which I think they kind of did. So they're capable of it.
I thought for sure Warhammer, this is going to be... I mean, you got to have it where you can highly customize your units.
Bro, that's what I'm saying. I've been saying that for 7 years, man.
It must be pretty difficult for Creative Assembly to scan through all of the different channels, all the different forums, and try to figure out what exactly they should be doing.
I would agree with that, but it's a little more complicated. The confusion is on purpose, and I would bet that most of the people who work at CA aren't aware of that. And, I mean, if it's not on purpose, how incompetent is that? How out of touch is CA with its core fan base that they didn't see this confusion coming, that they didn't see these conflicts coming? You know, once again, they prove themselves to either be malicious or incompetent. At around 48 minutes and 10 seconds in part 1, Legend goes to say something that would generally be reasonable.
You have to hit them where it hurts. Don't buy it. Because that's just not what I want them to do. I don't want them reskinning Troy. No more Warhammer reskins. That's enough of that. You've got to incentivize them on what they do want, which is money. So if you've got to convince them that what they're going to do is going to make them money.
Essentially, we have to vote with our wallet, which is why he didn't buy Pharaoh. He also states that if you want them to change, you need to convince them that it'll make money, which is true. But here is where we come into a bit of a conflict of interest with Legend. We need to vote with our wallets to elicit change, but you're still buying their Warhammer crap. That doesn't send a message of, oh, we need to change the way we make games. It sends the message of, oh, we need to keep making Warhammer crap because they'll buy that. You would think that would be obvious, but I guess not. The last bit of this segment essentially displays how shady and crooked CA is, especially when it comes to dealing with YouTubers and their community.
I do think it worked, but They actually have a rule in the creator Discord now that no creator is allowed to start a petition.
Because they work. Because they work.
It's just, it just proves even further that we need to bully these people to get what we want and not feel bad about it because they hate us actively.
When we look at something like Shadows of Change, which happened last year, Creative Assembly tried to pull the wool over everyone's eyes and say, oh, costs are up. That was a big thing that they were saying. And it was significantly less for significantly more money. And the community basically said, no, we're not doing this.
If I hear this used one more time as an example for why the Warhammer people aren't as consumer-brained as we know they are, I am going to blow a gasket. Remember the Chaos Wars DLC released back in 2023? $25. Still $25. Shadows of Change, the new one people got pissy about. $25. So here we come to the Omens of Destruction DLC. They took $2 off the top, and you only maybe get 4 or 5 new character models in this DLC than you did with the Shadows of Change DLC, and the amount of content you get for each individual faction is significantly less than what you got with the Chaos Dwarves DLC. That's a victory to you people? Really? You use this as an example of your superior intellect when it comes to dealing with companies and commerce, acting like you haven't bought every previous DLC up until this point. If anything, this serves as an example of how they have been lying to your face for years, and you have been allowing them to take advantage of you this entire time with zero recourse. I made a post a long time ago, back in 2019 or 2020, talking about how overinflated and overpriced the content for Total War had become back then. And I was called all kinds of, I was called entitled, I was called petulant, I was called poor, all kinds of things. But now we need to start voting with our wallets. Okay, idiots, all of you. You want to talk to me about transparency? What do you know now about the creation process that you didn't know before? What do you know now about production, the people working on it, how capable they are? What do you know now that you didn't know before? Vote with your wallet. Vote with your duh! I haven't bought a single thing from this company since Warhammer 2. I didn't buy Troy. I didn't buy 3 Kingdoms. Is that what you think the end goal is? To get this fiat-inflated, overpriced, scummy DLC model on sale? Is that... You people are dumb. I'm not doing a bit. I'm not doing a character. You are stupid. You are dumb. You need to talk to your parents and see if you can't get on medication or the government to see if you can't get on disability because you are mentally handicapped. You lack the critical thinking skills we've come to expect from chimpanzees. We need to start. Yeah, maybe 7 years ago when the Blood Pack came out, you fool.
If it's a game and I enjoy it, who cares if I can't really reconcile the two? Like, when I'm playing it and I see the bad elements of it, I'm just like, I'll just ignore that pile of crap over there.
Oh my gosh. If you ignore the bad parts of games, then they'll be good. Holy crap, this is revolutionary. Every game is a 10 out of 10 now. I'm gonna go back and play Troy again. Why isn't everybody doing this? Oh, wait! You know what happens when you become complacent in a society that praises mediocrity? Get what you fucking deserve!
Yeah, and that's a huge problem with the Reddit, is that somebody can just make something up, and people just give it a whole bunch of updates, and then it just becomes the prevailing myth, and you can't ever counter it.
The idea for Hyenas is speculated to be the brainchild of Rob Bartholomew, who previously worked at Bethesda and was involved with Brink, which was like a predecessor of Hyenas. So it's like he wanted to have another go at making Brink, which was shit, by the way, and pitched it to Sega until they eventually just capitulated and agreed to do it.
The topic of Hyenas is so messed up and extends to so many other topics outside of the gaming industry that to cover it in this video would make it twice as long. So we're not going to do that today. That video is coming eventually.
A lot of people, it's difficult to make that decision, to like make that leap and do something different, think outside the box.
I understand. Like, I understand, like, changing a little bit of, like, the way you approach things, but at the core, you're still doing what you enjoy. You know, but I don't know. I question these people's integrity because it's like, right. I mean, I remember.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to a lot of these guys on a pretty regular basis. I wouldn't call their integrity into question. It's difficult. Like, a lot of them recognize that the situation just sucks. They have no real power to stand up to Creative Assembly, but they're just big fans of the franchise and they want to be involved.
Unless Creative Assembly is threatening physical violence against them and their families, they aren't obligated to continue peddling their crap. And just because it doesn't immediately benefit them to stop doesn't mean that they should continue. If the Nuremberg trials have taught us anything, it's that I was just following orders isn't an acceptable answer. I understand why Legend is kind of soft on these people. He was just like them once, and I don't begrudge him that. So the first half of this conversation is just that, a conversation about Total War. Moving into the second half of this discussion, Apollo initially asks Legend to sell them on Warhammer.
Legend, what is it about Warhammer? Like, what, you are a lawyer or whatever, and you're trying to convince us in a court of law, why should Warhammer be, why do you enjoy it?
He's a salesman. Sell us on Warhammer.
Yeah, sell. Yeah. In a nutshell, you like the game because it's bad.
Yeah, I guess so.
What Warhammer? I'm looking at what makes it sure, it's broken, but like, is there anything there that like you go, wow, this is cool? Like, this is a good game, even though it's broken.
Yeah, it's a game of spectacle, really. So
I didn't say this initially in my first video that I made about this because I didn't want to do too much speculation on somebody I barely knew, but I feel confident in saying this now. Legend is strictly interested in these games on a cosmetic level, which isn't unique to him. That's why most people are interested in these games, the cosmetic aspect. There's not much else interesting about it. After that, and after some time, Apollo proposes this question.
Do you like Warhammer?
And for the next hour and 30 minutes, it is Legend refusing to give a definitive answer. At the conclusion of part 2, we are presented this argument from Legend.
With Warhammer, you need to come to a realization that the game is not for you.
I would just like to ask, what is the qualification for that? If you like it or not? I can discern when something just isn't my flavor. I can discern when something's just not for me. Don't insult my intelligence. A lot of people assume the opposite because I criticize the direction it's gone, but I like Warhammer Fantasy, and no, I will not call it the old world because Age of Sigmar is trite crap. Some of my favorite lore from Warhammer Fantasy is the War for the Eight Peaks, this pitched battle between dwarves and Skaven and goblins for this ancient dwarven hold. It doesn't have any of the politics, the resource management, the logistics. There's no setting certain regiments to hold off choke points so you can stave off the enemy long enough to get much needed resources from parts of the mountain that may have been lost or are about to be lost. There's none of that in this game. The game doesn't even attempt to try to capture a single iota of that sweet sticky sap that holds all these characters and races and set pieces together. It's a hollow husk. It's a skeleton of another game with makeup on it. But that wouldn't bother you too much, would it, Legend?
And people they think that I hate Warhammer. I'm not like a diehard Warhammer fan, but if a good game is good, I'll get into Warhammer. because the game is good.
Yeah, I wasn't into Warhammer at all when Total Warhammer came out.
It's not a good Total War game. It's not a good Warhammer game. And if it's not made for the Total War / Warhammer fantasy fans, who's it for then? That's an example of a rhetorical question. When CA advertises how many copies they've sold, or how many players they have, or how many games they can push out in a year, or how many studios they have, they're not talking to us, the consumer. They're talking to these people. To State Street, and BlackRock, and Vanguard, and Games Workshop, and Sega's investors. These games are not for us, they are for them. Moving into part 3 is more of the same. Just Legend attempting to avoid answering the initial question while talking about how bad the game is without actually saying it's bad, even though he's done everything except do that. He does eventually give an answer, though.
I guess I can hold like two conflicting point of views simultaneously, where I think that Total War has fallen, but I think he can get back up.
People have accused Pixelated Apollo and Voland of trying to back Legend into a corner to admit something he doesn't mean, but I think they're genuinely just trying to get what his take is. I'm the same way. I'm still not sure, which is incredibly annoying, considering the fact that I had to weigh through almost 4 hours of a discussion between 3 people. That is annoying. You're pissing me off. There were a couple other things that caught my eye that I want to talk about.
But the best Total War games are the ones that have a really good marriage between the campaign side of things and battles.
On this, me and Legend agree. I believe that the battles and the campaign complement each other and elevate each other to a higher plane of quality.
But what does it matter as long as it's not hurting anyone? Let them have their fun.
Well, I would hope not. You know there's a problem when the first thing on your list of pros is definitely not hurting anyone.
How about this? Do you think it's true that the addition of all of these grotesque, skeevy monetization practices have made the game objectively worse over time?
It's a complicated answer with that one. Not really yes or no, because it's a bit of both. It's definitely made the barrier to entry a lot higher, which is bad. But at the same time, you have to think of things from the developer's point of view. They would not have been able to just make this product, like Warhammer 3 as it is right now. They would not have been able to have that be the launch game. It just would not have been feasible.
Then don't make it. If this is the process required to make a piece of crap, don't do it. Do something else. I don't need to look at it from the developer's perspective. I don't care how it happened. The end result sucks. You can't tell me that Warhammer couldn't have been one game. You can't say that, because they did that. You know, all that stuff about, oh, we can't just port it across. Yes, they can. They did it. They took Pharaoh and they took Troy and they put it together and put it on the Steam page for $40. Okay? You can't tell me it's not possible, because there is a modern day example to the contrary.
Sort of put up with certain amount of skeevy behavior. Just put up with it. Just because if I don't put up with it, then you kind of get nothing.
I don't understand this idea people push where we need to meet companies halfway on nonsense instead of just letting them crumble for stupid practices. Wouldn't you rather just get a good game initially instead of having crap shoved down your throat? I get called a Puritan for saying stuff like that. And the reality is, I love Total War. I love Warhammer Fantasy.
The thing is, how can you be a fan of anything if you don't criticize it? Because we only criticize the things that we love.
The best part about what I do is that I don't have to kiss anybody's ass. I don't care about money. I don't care about fame. I'm a critic. I criticize. And I criticize because I love. And I want these games to be the best that they could ever possibly be. And if they're being kept from that potential because Creative Assembly wants to make a few extra dollars, I'm not going to put up with that, and neither should you. Legend, if you're watching, I want to talk to you one-on-one here. You have this thing where you determine a thing's quality by whether people like it or not. And you know that is incorrect. To determine quality, you have to take into account standards, history, improvements. Does it assimilate into the genre it's a part of, or does it innovate it? Is it playable? What's it cost? And that's before we even get into the actual game. You know, gameplay, mechanics, replayability, wow factor. Do people like it? Is a factor, but it's not the determining factor. Lots of people like Call of Duty. That game is slop. There is a niche minority of people who enjoy eating feces. That doesn't mean it's good, but you know that. I have rewatched your video response to Apollo's video, and I have rewatched this discussion maybe 3 or 4 times a piece. And I just want to ask, what are you doing? In this video and in this podcast, you are singing 2 completely different songs, and your change in position is both confusing and concerning. My working theory is that Apollo had you pegged from the start. You're afraid of your audience, and you know that if you just came out and said that these games are bad, categorically, they would turn on you. And so you kind of half did it with 2 other guys, so if the backlash got too hot, you could just blame them for it. You know, I can't prove that. I don't know if that's the truth for sure. I debated putting this segment in the video, obviously, just because I know where I stand in the pecking order. Someone in your position doesn't benefit at all from interacting with somebody like me. But just in case you find it enticing, I have some questions. And if you're truly interested in continuing discourse and you are invested in the future of this game and its community, I would like to have a sit down and ask you these questions and get some definitive answers, just so we know where we stand on the topic more definitively. The offer is there. Obviously, you're not expected or obligated to take it. So in conclusion, something that me and Legend can agree on is that Total War has fallen, but it can get better. I was a little disappointed on 2 fronts. The first one being that this wasn't the discussion I thought it was going to be. But during my time making this video, I realized that the community as a whole isn't ready to talk about the future just yet. These conversations need to be had, and they need to be had publicly. We need to talk to each other, air out grievances, argue, and come to an understanding with each other. That is the first step to saving Total War. The second thing I was disappointed with was the defeatist attitude that perpetrated this entire discussion. And I just want to say, guys, I know your fight has been long and you're tired, but it's not over yet. And you have something that you didn't have before. Me. The gaming industry is burning. We see it every day with these studios threatening to close down, big companies like Activision Blizzard and Ubisoft bleeding money. Even Creative Assembly isn't safe. If there was ever a time to start making demands, it is right now. I have a scheme in the works that requires me to take many different avenues to achieve it. Some are simple, some not so much, some cost money, but it'll be worth it in the end, and when I am ready, I will attempt to broker some kind of peace between the warring factions here. But not yet, though. I want blood.
I want problems, always!
But on a serious note, to the Total War community, it's not the Warhammer people's fault. The situation we're in, it's not their fault. They were soy-brained before they came over onto our side of the fence, you know, and to follow an IP that you spend money on and to suddenly be berated and insulted by people that you don't know for reasons that you couldn't possibly understand is, I'm sure, very frustrating for them. And besides, they're not even the biggest problem here. And I know some of you out there would say, it's just a game. Who cares? Yeah, it's just a game here, a shady practice here, a crummy DLC model here, you know, just for one game. Oh, but now it's for 2 games, now 3, now 4. Oh, it's just one company. Oh, it's just one industry. It's just one comic book, one movie. One more thing you can't do. One more thing you can't say. One more thing we're going to take from you. But who cares? Well, I'll tell you who cares. These companies care. Your government cares. So maybe you should too, a little bit. You know, I got over it. I got over this a long time ago. I found new things I liked, new things I enjoyed pursuing. And you know what I realized? All of these things are important to me. And if I don't fight for what's important to me, how can I call myself a man? A human being? A crusader? So now I'm back. And this time I have a plan, and I'm not going to stop fighting, and neither should you. Sisyphus pushes that boulder up the mountain, knowing damn well it's going to fall back down again. But the boulder has to be pushed, and if he doesn't do it, it doesn't get done. There's a struggle to be had here, gentlemen. Who better to have it than us?